Ryan Neiman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630. WMAL.
It is 8:37, and did you hear that? A feel-like temperature today of around 110 degrees. It's going to the actual temperature be somewhere around 100 degrees. It's going to be brutally hot. And of course, it has to do with global warming, right? I mean, it must be true because the mainstream media that I listen to all the time tells me that global warming is responsible for these incredible temperatures that we are now experiencing. Well, Patrick Michaels, senior fellow in the environmental studies at the Cato Institute, author of a book called Climate Coup, Global Warming Invasion of Our Government and Our Lives, begs to differ and says, in fact, there is no statistically significant warming trend since November of 1996. Patrick joins us now on the phone. Patrick, is that really right, that basically it's been flatlined since 96?
Yeah, but you got to remember that in the late 1990s there was a huge El Nino, and we had the hottest temperatures we ever measured. So that's kind of starting at a high point. But let's talk about the heat right now. I just plotted up the temperature history for Washington, D.C., and you can see it going up and up and up and up. Oh, wow, must be global warming. Well, no. Then plot out all the data for Virginia, which is obviously rural, and you see no trend in summer temperatures whatsoever. So, what we've done here in Washington is we've made our own little hell. How shocking is that?
That's because of, the concrete and the asphalt and the buildings?
Changing hands, too.
Yeah. Well, there is that. But seriously, you hear everywhere you go, climate change, global warming, and you say there's a lot of evidence that's not quite true.
Well, the planet's warmer than it was, and people have something to do with it. But if you really look at the data dispassionately, what you see is the amount of observed warming is clearly running below what was predicted to happen. And, you don't care whether the surface of the planet warms or not. You care how much it warms. And if it's not warming all that much, what's going to happen is you're going to adapt to it, and you're going to develop technologies over the course of 100 years, and that will be that. If it were going crazy, maybe you'd have to do something, but it just doesn't look like that.
I have noticed among global warming, climate change activists that when it is cold outside and conservatives sort of pick on them and go, ha, it snowed on your global warming gathering or what have you, that they go, oh, dumb conservatives, they don't understand that the weather patterns have nothing to do with it. Now that it's really hot outside, I have a bunch of people in my Twitter feed who are climate people telling me, oh my gosh, it's really hot outside, but don't connect it to climate change, real sarcastic, like I'm being dumb again.
Have your friends go to the National Climatic Data Center. That's a branch of our government. And after they go into that for a while, they will find the statewide temperature data for Virginia and have them plot up the summer temperatures. And what they'll see is no rise.
Is there any way to determine the temperature today on the Earth versus what it was, say, 500 years ago or 300 years ago? I mean, is there a point of reference we can say, hey, it was at this temperature a long, long time ago? Do we have that science to be able to do that?
Sort of, and that's the answer. Sort of. You obviously don't have thermometers, but you have things that kind of estimate the temperature. People like to use tree rings, but remember, trees only grow during the growing season, and they really respond to moisture as much as they respond to temperature. So that's not the world's greatest indicator, but the tree rings, were responsible for that famous hockey stick record. I mean, if you want to base global policy on it, sort of measuring the temperature, you can sort of have some policy.
Well, we had an ice age, right? So we all agree on that?
We definitely had that. 5,000 feet of ice over Chicago. That's climate change,
Yeah, and what caused the ice age? Do we have a concrete?
Oh, the current religion is that it had to do with changes in the Earth's orbital parameters. What caused an ice age is, you can kind of get the Earth into an ice age in your brain, not with all that much climatology, but getting the Earth out of an ice age after it turns all kind of white and reflects away the sun's radiation, that's a trick.
Okay, now we had hurricanes, at least in like the early 2000s. The last couple of years, we've had some unbelievable blizzards. We've had tornadoes, things like that. That has nothing to do with.
Well, okay, let's take a look at tornadoes.
Okay,
the number of tornadoes is going up. Okay, but the number of severe tornadoes, these F3, 4, 5 jobs, is not. In fact, it's actually going down. What's happening is we're detecting more little weenie tornadoes because we have this new Doppler radar. If they were actually going up, the number of severe ones would be going up. Hurricane activity around the globe is at or near the lowest value that it's ever been measured at since we started keeping records where we could measure it somewhere around 1970.
Right.
So, Pat, how long...
for that.
Go ahead.
Well, because I remember when we had Katrina and we had everybody said, oh, my God, we're going to have years of these hurricanes. We really haven't had them.
Yeah.
No, they were wrong. As soon as people say for sure that they know something in climate, the opposite happens. I'm convinced.
How long have we been recording temperatures on the planet Earth?
There are some records that go back into the 17th century and early 18th century.
But in the grand scheme of the history of the Earth, that's like a blink of the eye.
Real thermometric data goes back to the mid-19th century.
And that's a blink of the eye when you're talking about the history of the Earth, right?
Yeah.
So we really don't understand, the cycles that the Earth goes through from time to time.
Well, there are a lot of things we don't understand. We had, two periods of warming in the 20th century. One from about 1910 to 1945, and then the other one was from 1975 to the late 1990s. They were both about the same magnitude. Now, the first one, in the early part of the century, couldn't have been caused by people throwing carbon dioxide in the air because we hadn't put that much in the air. So that shows that there's like a lot of what we call unforced variability in the system. And people think the second one may have been caused by it, and I have some agreement with them because of the way it warmed and the fact that the stratosphere, which is about 10 miles above our head, cooled at the same time. That's supposed to happen when you put greenhouse gases in the air.
There was a poll out last week that showed that belief in man-made global warming in the last 4 years or so had gone from something in the 70s to something in the 40s, which seems to be a pretty reasonable position to be skeptical about it, especially with all the scandals coming out. Is there any suggestion that maybe climate change folks might change their message to something other than deniers and just keep yelling?
No, that's the problem.
Yeah.
You and I notwithstanding, the American people are getting pretty sick of horror stories and apocalypse stories about climate. They're turning off. They get tired of the end of the world is nigh.
Right.
Most people do. They hear it too many times. But I see things coming out of Washington, even yesterday, that the government is going to redouble its efforts to combat those climate skeptics. Well, the problem is the government is redoubling its hype when it does that, and it just fails miserably in getting the attention of people when it continues to go end of the world, end of the world, end of the world.
All right.
Go, well, wait a minute, I heard that one before.
All right.
Let's try something a little more rational.
All right.
Maybe it's going to warm up, and let's have a real debate about what you really want to do about it by looking at the numbers, and people are not impressed when that happens.
If we raise the debt ceiling, will global warming go away?
It might.
All right, Pat.
All right. Listen, Pat, we got to run. Thank you so much. Good to have you here. Pat Michaels with the Cato